Welcome to the Love Does podcast. My name is Jody Luke, and I'm the executive director of Love Does. And one of the best parts of my job is that I get to meet some truly exceptional leaders. And today is totally that with our guest. I'm really excited for everybody to hear from her. You know, Love Does cares for the vulnerable, fights for human rights, and provides education in conflict zones. And we've been working in Somalia for almost 10 years. We're doing all of those things. It's hard for me to believe it's been almost that long. We've been working with Elman Peace and this really dynamic duo, this mother-daughter duo of Fartoon and Ilwad. And Ilwad is on the podcast today. And she champions women, she cultivates leaders, and she really finds practical ways to tackle some of Somalia's biggest challenges, and in doing so, really alleviate some of the suffering that many face there. It's nothing short of breathtaking to watch. I get to Zoom with Ilwad almost every month, talking about all of the stuff that we're working on together, and she is a thoughtful and truly fearless leader, a real visionary. You have won more global awards than I can even count, and truly you deserve 10 times that many. So welcome to the podcast. Thank you for your time. It's a real honor to have you on.
Thank you so much, Jody, for that lovely introduction. I'm very happy to be here on the podcast with you.
So tell me a little bit about you and your background, and also what is it like to live in Somalia today as compared to even maybe 5 or 10 years ago?
Things change a lot in Somalia quite rapidly. You may notice my background right now. That is the call to prayer. I live next to the second biggest mosque in Mogadishu right now. So you may hear a bit of it in the background. But I was born in Somalia, and I left when I was 2, when the war broke out. And my parents had to make the difficult decision to split up. My father would remain in Somalia to continue to fight for peace, and my mother would leave for what was supposed to be a temporary reprieve of the conflict with my sisters and I. And when we made it to Kenya, we had expected to be able to go back to Somalia, but until today, the conflict has never fully ended. And so while we were in the refugee camp, my father was killed in Somalia for his peace building work. And then there was no turning back. We were lucky to gain asylum to Canada, and my mother, at the age of 24, with 3 young girls in tow herself, had at that age already become a widow, a refugee, and trekked halfway across the world to find better opportunities for us. And growing up in Canada, I would say my life was pretty simple, pretty normal. I never considered myself any different from any of the kids I grew up with, but I did have a constant awareness of the opportunity and also the responsibility that we had, even at a very young age, to achieve this unspoken goal of doing something with our lives. And the journey to return back to Somalia was never prescribed for myself or my sisters, but one by one, we all found our way back to Somalia. And so in 2010, I returned to Somalia to see what role I could play in the peaceful transition out of conflict, to fight and work alongside my mother for a just and safe and fair Somalia. And what was supposed to be just 1 month when I first came back turned into 13 years. And every day something new is happening in Mogadishu. So when I first came back, it literally was a war zone. Out of the 17 districts of Mogadishu, only 2 were controlled by the government. The rest was controlled by the extremist group, Al-Shabaab. And so the front line of war was in my backyard. And that meant no movement. That meant very little interaction with anyone else than those that were living in my home with me. It meant, constantly taking shelter, a lot of suffering, being confronted with things I've never seen or experienced before. But I also saw a lot of light and community and love and joy in those very difficult times. And I found myself being very useful with the overwhelming population of children and youth in Somalia. So 1 month turned into 13 years very quickly. And today, life is very different. There's still a lot of challenges and a lot of hurdles that we still have to overcome. But I have a community, I have friends, I have hobbies like surfing. So there's a lot happening now.
Of course you have surfing. That makes total sense. Uh, Everything I have read about your dad, he was a really charismatic leader. And as you said, he was a peace activist who was assassinated. And as an aside, as I was listening to you talk, I just think he would be so proud of who you are and who you've become and who you've chosen to be. So I, I've read too that he's been called the Somali father of peace, and that he was known for the saying, drop the gun, pick up the pen. And we've started a lot of schools together, Love does, and with your help. I think about education and I think about the power of what that can do in Somalia and the access to it. What does that look like? And what opportunities can that give some kids and also some young girls to have access to education?
Yeah, Jody, what really strikes me about the work that we're doing now, and also the work that my late father incepted as well too, is that we don't need to constantly reinvent the wheel. We
Mm.
know what humans need everywhere they are in the world. They want dignity. They want to be able to reach their potential. They want to be able to take care of themselves and their families, and they want to live in safety. And what my late father started in Somalia under the campaign Drop the Gun, Pick Up the Pen was exactly that, giving an alternative, dignified livelihood to those that were being used by unscrupulous warlords. Something as simple as the campaign Drop the Gun, Pick Up the Pen, exchanging weapons for education and an opportunity to enter civilian life as a productive member. And more often than not, when given that opportunity, people are more inclined to be peaceful instead of being spoilers of peace. And so 27 years after his assassination, that same recipe applies. Yet we're living in a very different context today, where then we had tribal-based conflict that was warlords, and you knew who the parties to the conflict were. Now we have a new phenomenon where you have a faceless enemy, where you have an ideology that is foreign to the community. And that makes it harder to mediate. But we have the same underlying grievances of lack of opportunities. We have a 100% privatized education system throughout the whole country. We have a polarized society. There are deeply entrenched gender attitudes and barriers that prevent women from participating in the political spaces. And with everything being privatized, it becomes difficult for a young person or a woman to carve their own future. And so what we're doing together is addressing those grievances, the underlying factors, the structural issues that exist within the community that prevent someone from choosing a path that allows them to reach their potential, but also contributes to social cohesion. And so
You know what?
something
I
as
love your passion. I love it. It's like you get talking and it just, and you're so articulate. You really are a gifted communicator. I have to believe some of that was just in your genes, but I love listening to you talk and the vision that you know, are out there. And then also you couple that with your fearlessness. You have been a pioneer. You were the very first person to co-found a rape crisis clinic for survivors of gender-based violence. Not a small deal in Somalia. Why have you courageously, unapologetically fought for not only just women, but this marginalized group of women?
Yeah, and I think back to the point as well too, that it's some of the initiatives that we're doing, they're so necessary and life-saving, but they're also common sense. We found ourselves in 2010 constantly reporting about human rights violations, sexual violence, women getting abducted, being trafficked. And after continuously reporting on it, not being able to find a single service center to refer them to. There weren't even the clinical management of rape medical supplies in the country, that we had to import the post-exposure prophylaxis treatments. So sometimes we need to act. And that has been the spirit that has guided us at the Elman Peace Center. And we're lucky to have partners like Love Does that mobilize alongside us to fill the gaps that need to be filled at the moment they need to. So we need to not only advocate for the survivors in the communities, but address the issues.
I would say at Love Does, we're definitely aggressive on the doing part of Love Does. And, you started the Rape Crisis Center, but then we were the first people to have a school, an all-girls leadership school outside of Mogadishu. And that just launched in the spring as well. A lot of energy, a lot of excitement. It's always amazing to me too, because the government became aware of it, and it's really been favorably received. And it was almost like a aha moment for them. One of the things I remember when we were talking about it, though, you said Love Does was on the top of that building. And at the time you said, I'm really grateful for the investment in infrastructure, because so many agencies around the world had stopped investing in infrastructure. And the reason why they did that was because they were concerned that the buildings would be destroyed. And I will never forget what you said in response. You said, but what happens if they're not? And it always takes somebody to be on the forefront and the leader to move that forward. And you continually do that. However, it could be scary sometimes to be the first, to be out there. How have you not let fear overwhelm you?
It is scary to be first in many ways, but I don't do anything alone. I'm supported by a whole team. People speak loudly together as opposed to just one person. It creates a sense of safety in itself. And it's never easy challenging the status quo, but the impact speaks for itself. And every situation where we've had to push boundaries, we've been able to see the benefits of that. And we are constantly reminded of the challenges that exist in Somalia, not only from the risks that come with some of the work that we do, but also a lot of the people that we've lost along the way, not just from my own family, but also colleagues and staff and others in the space. And that in itself also fuels me to continue. I really believe that sometimes out of a difficult situation is to go further in, knowing that something better is on the other side. But when you're not alone in the fight, it's easier. And I'm very lucky to have a group of people with me.
You are. I also think you dance. I've seen you dancing on TikTok quite a bit, or on Instagram. You're quite the dancer. And you've got
Well,
this
I don't know if I'm a
style.
good dancer, but I'm always dancing. Yes.
You are. You are. And I actually think there's something beautiful about that, because it intersects the heaviness sometimes of the situation. And you have this beautiful smile and you exude joy when you're dancing, and it's almost like you're free in that time. And I love it. I think it's, and the kids love it. They just want to follow you. You throw up like this peace sign with the purpose, and you got it all going on.
You know what I think we really relate on with Love Does? There's a lot of joy, a lot of laughter, a lot of
Yes.
balloons. And I think that's so important, because at the end of the day, if you're in a difficult environment and a difficult context, you could either get through it together with a smile, or you could do it with a frown. But either way, you're in that situation. And when we focus on play and community and rejoicing together, we are able to make difficult situations easier to bear. So, movement and dance and, laughter and comedy is a really big part of our work. And it's not at all, downplaying the gravity of what's happening in Somalia, but it is important. It is important. Even when we do food distributions that we're also lucky to be partnering with you on, we try to do them as fast as possible. We have now developed a system where, with Somalia on the brink of a looming famine yet again, the worst drought has hit the Horn of Africa and in the last 40 years, and it's affecting Somalia the most in the region. And so we have 2.9 million people that are internally displaced because they don't have access to water or to food. So with Love Does, we've been able to provide very nutritious, ready-made meals in a dignified way. We don't have people lining up for hours under the hot sun. And when we do that, we have entertainment, we cook, we give people meals while they're waiting for other meals. And I think that this just is really the spirit that we want to evoke in all of our work. We are in this together.
Well, you do it. And I remember having a conversation about the gravity of the work that you do and what that looks like. And I was describing the situation of several of the Afghan refugees who have come to the U.S., and we've been resettling them within Love Does. And several of them were experiencing PTSD. And I was sharing with you about PTSD. And you said, in Somalia, we don't have PTSD. And I was like, what do you mean? And you said, because we don't have post. There's no post to the trauma. And I thought, what a gift that you could even say that there's a post included in it. It just blew my mind. But out of that conversation, we started talking about also what it would look like for the staff that work at the baby home and with former child soldiers and the safe house. It's really difficult to work in those spaces for a long period of time. And we came up with doing a retreat for the staff last year. And it was really cool. I think, could you describe that and the importance of that, and maybe a story that came out of that?
That was the biggest gift. And, most international aid workers, diplomats, UN agencies that are based here in Somalia, they have a mandatory 3-week rotation where they have to leave Somalia for R&R, for mental health, to be able to come back and serve in the full capacity. We share the same hardships as the very community that we aim to support. And so there hasn't been ever resources dedicated specifically just to, take care of the pillars within the community, taking care of the strong ones. And when we were able to organize this retreat for our staff, for the caseworkers, for not just the technical colleagues that are working behind the desks, but those that are really within the community, it was incredible. Everyone returned back to Somalia with such renewed vigor, but also really feeling taken care of by the organization, feeling like they had the resources and tools to look at their everyday problems that they're working on from a different perspective, and being encouraged to take care of themselves. That's something that is so foreign in our context. Even the concept of therapy, mental health, is considered being weak or ungrateful to speak about the trauma you are so lucky to have overcome. In Somalia, we have many different ways to recognize trauma, different words for it. For disabilities, learning disabilities, we know, mental illness, we know, but mental health, the proactive activity of taking care of your wellness and your well-being indicators, it's completely foreign. There isn't even a Somali equivalent of that term, and it's so necessary. So that was.
Well, you're a pioneer. You'll name it. There'll be a new word because of you and how you champion women and really all people navigating these situations. It also makes me think of the former child soldiers. Why was that a priority for you to get involved with that in the last many years, to rehabilitate and to resettle former child soldiers? And there's been some really powerful stories of transformation that have come from that. Can you think of one that comes to mind?
I mean, there's many. I mean, we have been working on the rehabilitation and reintegration of child soldiers from all different factions, because till today, we see that children are not just recruited because they can't find adults. They are preferred by all actors, and they are actively exploited. And there are those that are kidnapped and have not seen their families for years, that enter into our programs after the region that they were being held custody in have been liberated. There are those that have been captured at the front lines in active combat, that we facilitate their return to civilian status. There are others that are now in military courts facing execution that we advocate for. Sometimes we are successful, but the challenges that exist on the treatment and handling of children in armed conflict are very, very deeply entrenched in Somalia, but we are making progress. Right now, some of the kids that we have in our care that have been handed over are as young as 7. As young as 7. And so.
And this is where surf therapy come in, right?
Yes. Surf therapy is one of the tools that we use to begin to help children to regain their sense of self, have a new positive identity, to see themselves and other children that are coming from other armed groups as, surfers, having an outlet, a free way that they can sustain, because the beach is always there for them, to be able to navigate their new life. And there's many stories of resilience. I think what sticks with me a lot is a young boy that was handed over to us. So there's some that voluntarily dissociate and enter our programs, and some that have been captured. And that position already shows you the different mindset. Someone that has been captured didn't necessarily come there voluntarily. And so it takes time to facilitate their case management, their tracing and reunification with their family members. And in that, we try to show the children that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And we equip them with counselors, with skills, with resources that help them see a life they didn't have before. And this young man, this boy, I should say, his story really speaks to me, because empowerment, when a child can choose to stop contacting their own parents because their parents are affiliated with an extremist group. He went through the program and he recognized that he had a different life ahead of him. He did not want to go back to an extremist group. And that meant cutting off every single person in his own immediate nuclear family. And that made me think there's something new that we're giving him, but there's also a sense of responsibility that we have to make sure his reintegration is sustained and successful, and that he can grow up to be his own person and never have to fall back into that situation because he didn't make it. And so there's a lot of pressure in making sure that that individual who now has this mindset, that now has this trajectory that they never thought about before, and is willing to go on it on their own at the young age of 15, 16, and abandon their whole family because their family want them to fight. It's incredibly humbling. And it just shows how much they trust us as well to choose that path for themselves. And it encourages me to always think about not just the individual recovery, not just what services can we temporarily offer this child, a safe house or education or a skill, but what can we do to build and rebuild the entire community around that child? So when they leave our programs, they can be safe, they can be successful, they can have access to jobs, that they have safety nets within the community. So everything that we do for the individual always has a focus on rebuilding the society, because that's the only way that we can sustain peace. And in the absence of political peace, till today in Somalia, we invest in social peace.
I love that. And we've had some really hopeful scenarios come up recently where the government has been able to recover land that was previously occupied by al-Shabaab. So I'm really excited about this project that we've just been brainstorming even recently in an area of the country that, as you describe it, when land is now reclaimed, often just women and young children are left, and there's not a lot of opportunities for them. We have a women's resource center in the Dominican Republic, and thought, what if we replicated it in one of these areas to give opportunity for these women? My background is as a woman entrepreneur. Of course, you start everything around the world. And what if we gave some job skills training? Maybe we did literacy. We had, weaving, pottery. I love the one that you brought up. You said mobile repair, cell phone repair. It reminds me of in Uganda, some of the women prisoners. We have an education program there where we do motorcycle repair, and then they get out and actually have a skill. How cool that in this remote area of Somalia, we could do cell phone repair classes for women, that they could actually then have a job and a way to provide for themselves and their family and their community, and a really practical skill. Tell me what this Women's Resource Center might mean for that area.
Well, exactly just what you said, Jody. I mean, we are an incredibly digitally connected society, from the rural to the urban communities alike. We depend strongly on fintech and mobile banking. So for most people, the way they are able to make an income or receive support or donations from their families, at the most part, is quite literate on how to use technology. So the challenge that exists now is these rural communities, they have to send their mobile devices to the capital cities. And if women learn how to fix them, they can use that as a way to sustain themselves and their communities. But in order to sustain the hard-won gains of security in these locations, there has to be economic opportunities. Just for some demographics, for those who are not familiar with Somalia, 78% of the population is under the age of 30. Our average age is 16 years. We have been in conflict for more than 30 years. These newly recovered territories that have just been liberated as recent as just 1 year ago have not been accessible by the Somali government for the last 15 years. So that means the majority of those that are living in those communities are children that have only ever known one force as the authority. So now with that completely out, there's a vacuum, but also an opportunity to fast track some of the progress that we're seeing now in the capital cities, in the places that are more stable, to begin to already promote values of human rights, of peace, of solidarity, and making sure that women are not just the spoils of war in this process, but that they are the leaders, that they can influence the processes that ensure their well-being. So the Resource Center is going to go a step ahead from what we've seen from traditional humanitarian aid. It's not only going to empower, it's not only going to inspire women, but it's going to give them the resources that they need to rebuild their lives with strength and resilience, and to reclaim their future as well too. And so we're going to teach financial literacy. We're going to invest in safe spaces where they can learn the most marketable and profitable skills. We're going to connect them with other industry leaders. They'll be able to have mentors, and more importantly, they'll have investments, access to capital, to actually be able to take the steps forward in taking care of themselves and their families. And I think that's how we can rebuild a community. So there's a lot to be hopeful for. We have seen the work we've done together being scalable in Mogadishu, where we started our first leadership academy, the first of its kind in the country. We then duplicated that following the same model in a region. So I'm really happy with how our cooperation is constantly decentralizing opportunity. Where others are staying in the safety zones, we, with your support, are able to consistently go to more acute locations so that no woman has to trek miles and miles for services and opportunities.
I love it. Cell phone repair women in Somalia. It's going to take over. It gets me just so excited. What an awesome opportunity. And you're the person to lead the way. There's no question. What I do love too is that you've done this a lot with your mom, and your mom is wonderful. What does it mean for you to work with your mom this closely on all of these different endeavors? And I assume that that's not super common in Somalia, or maybe it is.
No, I don't think only in Somalia, but in many places. I mean, I think there are family businesses and efforts, but we really are partners. We have fought alongside each other. We brainstorm, we consult each other. We have gone through a lot of things together. So the relationship I have with my mom is very different than the one that my other sister has with her. And I think it's important because she lets me lead, and she trusts my judgment, and I trust hers. And I think that we balance each other out very well. And when I first started working with her, she encouraged me to try to get involved. She gave me responsibilities, but really mentored me as well too. And her visionary leadership is what draws me to serve every day. But not only me. I mean, there's people traveling from all over the world to join our mission because of her. And I think that she really speaks and embodies the values that we champion, that women can lead, that youth can lead, and they have to be in the positions to, change their communities, not tomorrow, but today. So it's good working with my mom. I learned so much from her all the time. And I think that if I could even be just a quarter of the type of leader she is, I think I would be just fine. Yeah.
She is so proud of you. She was talking about your work ethic just recently. She is just so proud of you. And it just is a great example of a mom championing another daughter or another woman. And then what do? They take the opportunity, and then they run with it, and then they champion other women. And so it's what it's supposed to look like. What would you want for your country in 5, 10, 15 years? What would you want to see in 50 years for the women of Somalia if you could snap your fingers and make it happen?
I want, and I don't want this to be in 50 years. I want this to be in 5 years, tomorrow, if possible. But I think that looking over your shoulder and constantly being afraid of something happening to you because you are a woman is something that we need to eradicate. And it needs to happen now. And we can't just rely on individual champions that are within positions of authorities. There needs to be accountability, there needs to be justice, and we need to end impunity. That is the biggest goal. That's where the foundation. And I'm hopeful that we're working towards that. I also hope to see universal suffrage and democracy in Somalia, where women's political participation is not tokenized or limited. I want young girls growing up to be whatever they want to be and to be encouraged to be just that and to be celebrated and not to be, told what they can be because of their gender. And I think we're getting there, you know?
Look at you. Look at you. Really. I mean, what an example of that. So I look at you and I think hope. I think hope that translated into a whole bunch of buildings in Somalia that wouldn't have been there if you wouldn't have said yes. And a whole bunch of people that wouldn't have been championed if they were child soldiers or they were victims of gender-based violence or they were young kids that didn't have access to education. That's hope for all of them. And that's because you said yes. And you say yes with joy. You say yes with dancing. You say yes with just a lot of wonder and love. And we love working with you. And I'm so grateful for the example and the inspiration that is you. It is really one of the greatest privileges to work alongside you and learn from you and be a part of some of these really transformative projects. And I would be amiss to say that there's a whole Love Does community that's behind you too, that wants what you want. So just well done. Keep going. And thanks for your time today. Thanks for sharing your heart and your passion. It's undeniable. And you are hope. And I think it's going to happen.
I believe so too. Thank you so much for having me.